Welcome to the latest edition of Data Talks. I'm Wolfgang Fengler, CEO of World Data Lab, and this is a very special data talk for two reasons. One is we're in a special location. We're in Sydney the first time, and second, I have a well-known, respected Steve Killelea with me. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you. It's very good to be on the show, Wolfgang.
Fantastic, Steve. Steve, you have a very long career, you're one of the most respected Australians, both for your entrepreneurial and your philanthropic work. Tell us about what we call the person behind the numbers. Tell about the life, what shaped you and what made you the person you are.
Well, it's always, I get that question a lot, but it's always a really hard one to answer because I guess my life in many ways has just been a journey. It sort of happened to me rather than it was anything which was planned. So the early days of my life, actually, I spent surfing. I surfed in in fact, I've surfed every continent in the world other than the Antarctic. It wasn't until about 25 I really started to settle down. And at that point, then I decided to get involved in computing. And so what I did then was a crash course in computing. But getting to do that, I thought hard about what did I want to do with my life. And there were three different things. And one was obviously computing. The other was to be a social worker. And the other one was to take people on adventure holidays around the world, whitewater rafting down the Zambezi, hiking through the Annapurnas. And on that one, I thought, well, that'll only last till I was 35, and then I'm probably a bit old for it. And the social work, I didn't think it'd make enough money for the kind of lifestyle I wanted. And then, so intuitively, I just went into computing. And that turned out to be great because I turned out to be good at it. And from there, I sort of ended up developing two computer programs. The first one ended up with a company listed on NASDAQ, and the second one with a company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And from that, I made quite a bit of money. So at that point in time then, I thought, well, what will I do? And I thought, well, what I want to do is do a lot of work in working with the poorest of the poor. Because, see, when I was surfing, I'd spent time living with families who were incredibly poor. Like, I can remember living with a family in Bali, and there was $1 a day, 40 cents for the room, and 20 cents for each of the meals. And that was because it was pretty skim living because you're trying to surf for as long as you could. And so I then decided, well, where am I going to go and do this? At that point, then I caught up with a friend who was the treasurer for World Vision, and then he took me over to Laos, did the first project on developmental aid, and I was hooked. But what I didn't realise at the time was that the poorest people in the world live in conflict zones. And so I then, in the ensuing decade, spent a lot of time in war zones, near post-war zones, and then it's in northeast Kivu in the Congo. And I started to think, what are the most peaceful countries in the world? What are they like? And is there anything I could learn from them to bring into the projects I was doing? Searched the internet, couldn't find anything, and that's how the Global Peace Index was born. But that creates a very profound and fundamental question. Because if a simple businessman, such as myself, can be walking through Africa and wonder, what are the most peaceful nations in the world, and it hasn't been done, then how much do we know about peace? If you can't study something, can you truly understand it? And if you can't measure it, how do you even know whether your actions are helping you or hindering you in achieving your goals? You simply don't.
Wow. So much to cover. There's obviously, we have a few things in common, Steve. Both we are, at least I'm an inspiring entrepreneur. So I'm keen to hear a bit your big lessons from your entrepreneurial story. I'm as passionate about sports. So we do this on another podcast. And then I want to talk more about the Peace Index. So just on the entrepreneurial part, what are your main takeaways and lessons and reflections on your life as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the first thing is it's a bit like following the water flowing down a hill. So when you start off, you're 2 or 3 or 4 people. And so you can have a business plan, you'll have a strategy for where you're going, but it's only as good as the first day you start to do business. And what will happen, things will unfold in front of you. And so as they unfold, you need to follow the opportunity rather than come back and try and follow some rigorous business plan. Now, when corporations get bigger, and let's say you've got a few 100 million turnover a year, and you've got an established product line over a period of time, then the 5-year plans become very important. But in the early days, it's really being understand, I guess, the flow, and then being able to adjust. I think one of the other things too is in life, and I think this is applicable in more than just the entrepreneurial journey. In life, opportunities arise. It's like a window opening. You've got to jump through it while the window's open. Otherwise, they close because opportunities come, but then they go.
Well, jump through the window and go down the river, right? Those are the sportsmen speaking. Fantastic, Steve. So let's go. We have here, by the way, the Global Peace Index 2025 just in front of me. I think just published. You were in London recently to launch it. To go back to the beginning, what you said, and that's, again, a relationship that we have together on data. Just tell us about how you went about measuring peace and what would you say to somebody who is now challenging you and says, peace is so complex, so difficult, conflict as well. You can't, can you really quantify it? What would be your response and how did you go about it?
Right. Well, Wolfgang, they're great questions. So the first thing you've got to do is start with the definition of peace. If you want to measure something, you've got to have a pretty clear idea what the definition, the boundaries around what you're trying to measure. Because when we think of peace, we can look at it as the Buddhist definition with the absence of afflictive emotion. A Christian perspective might be full of the love of God. Other people might think, well, it's just the iron fist and peace is when the guns stop. So there's all sorts of different definitions of peace. So we started with the concept of the absence of violence, or fear of violence is the definition of peace. Now that's what's called negative peace, but it does give you something you can really quantify. And then we started to think about, well, how do you now break that up? And we came to 3 different domains. So the first one was internal safety and security. The second one's ongoing conflict. And the third one's militarization. Now, for some, people think militarization keeps the peace. And in many ways, that's true. It does. But if you're looking for the absence of violence or fear of violence as a definition, then why do you have the military? So one is either you want to assert geopolitical influence or influence over someone else, or 2, you're worried about someone doing it for you. Therefore, the military does fit in under that definition.
And so given you launched us the report, and this is, which edition is this now?
This is the 18th year.
18th. Wow. So it's in 20 years. So that's almost like the journey of Transparency International and some other big global think tanks, I would say, that you're now part of. Do you want to share just the big highlights? And I think also when I went through the report, one big message is actually there's one area where the world is not going in the right direction. Obviously, we in Europe are quite affected by with the Ukraine war. But just share a bit the highlights and where you see the state of the world and the state of peace in the world, say, compared to one other big milestone in my world, which was the end of the Cold War. So how would you reflect on the last 30 years and the state of the world today?
Gee, well, it's a big question, actually, to capture it all in a few sentences, which is difficult, but I'll try. So if we're looking at today, there's 59 active conflicts globally. That's the most since the end of the Second World War. So the question then comes about is why? And the real answer to that question is we're not able to solve the current conflicts, because we went back to the 1970s, and this is height of the Cold War. 49% of conflicts finished with a military victory for either the government or the rebels, and 23% with a signed peace agreement. So we move on now to the 2010s. The peace agreements are down to 4% and conflicts are at 9%. So this concept of forever wars in some ways is very, very real. So it's our inability to be able to solve the conflicts. I think that's really at the essence of it. Now, if we're looking at from another direction, now if we went back, so we've got the 18 years of the Global Peace Index, peace has deteriorated every year other than 3 while we've been doing it. And there hasn't been 1 year where it's improved since about 2015. So that's a long while. Now, if we break it down further into the three domains I mentioned earlier on, what you'll find is that ongoing conflict nearly accounts for the entire fall in peacefulness. Now, there are other areas which are actually improving. Globally, homicide rates are on the decrease. That's great, as in many areas of the world, so is violent crime. Now, we come and look at it at another level. One of the things we're seeing currently in the world today is this concept of the rise of middle-level powers. So we'd call this the great fragmentation of international influence. So it has been Europe and the US have pretty much dominated since the end of the Cold War. Now we've seen China rise over the last few years. But in many ways, China may be at the peak of its influence now. Now, it's not that it's going to go away. It's not that it's not going to be a big player and a powerful player going forward. But currently it's got debt as 300% of GDP. Foreign direct investment inbounds dropped 95% in the last 3 years. And as these factors come together, we're now seeing the rise of middle-level powers. So if we went back to the end of the Cold War, 1991, there were 14 countries which had what we'd measure as substantial influence in another country. That's now up to 34.
Yeah. So, Steve, if you were to zoom out now, and we're covering a lot what you call development space, poverty, the middle class, prosperity, seems to be some type of disconnect or counter trends. On the one hand, you just documented and showed that the world became less peaceful over the last 10 years broadly, but then the development statistics show the world became more prosperous over the last 10 years, but obviously COVID making it worse in most countries are more prosperous today than 10 years ago. What's your reading of the state of the world, of some things, important thing, also life expectancy goes in the right direction, but peacefulness goes in the wrong direction?
Well, I guess this is the problem. You should never classify too many things together. So if we went back and we, let's say, look at the COVID, and we saw the drop through COVID in the number of people who could afford food, they were still not back at the stage where we were prior to COVID. So one, it's back to the time length of the time period you want to measure over. And on the current statistics, it'll probably be 2030 before we get back to the same levels of people who are food insecure as what it was prior to COVID. So there'd be one. Now, certainly life expectancies are going up. The child mortality rates are on the decrease. And we can see the global GDP keeps on growing, and obviously with it per capita income keeps increasing too. But it's not distributed evenly. One needs to have a look at the distribution. So some figures I just read recently, and we'll take them as being reasonably accurate, was that in the US, the consumer spending there is robust, but 50% of the cumulative spending is coming from 10% of the population. So we've got to start to now break it down and look at the more detailed level to truly understand those which are flourishing and thriving and those which are still in trouble. So if we look today, we look at Sudan, and we can just see this week the Rapid Defence Force, they killed 400 people in a maternity clinic. We've just, through my family foundation, pumping a large sum of money in there for famine relief. It only costs us 16 cents a day to keep someone alive, and with the right level of nutrition. So it's not that expensive in reality, but it's hard to see those people thinking that their lives have improved. Now, if you're in another country, one of the countries, some of the Asian giants which boomed, like if you're looking at, let's say, Cambodia or Thailand, probably your life is robustly better. You move back to Europe, for example, what we can see is a lot of dissatisfaction with the current democratic system. And that's because, in many ways, it's not delivering for many large sections of the population.
No, thanks for that big worldview, Steve. So, we are. I think it's right to say, in this turbulent time, in this interesting time, if you are more neutral, look at it. What's your? You have seen a lot, obviously, through your life and analyzed many periods. If you look forward the next 10 years, what's your not just trajectory for world peace, but also what are the fundamental changes you would want to see and you're trying to influence so the world will be more peaceful in 10 years?
Right, okay. Well, might back it up, and what are the big things which are going to change humanity in the next 20 years, let's say? And the one thing I think it's quite often overlooked is the life extension. So they've got techniques coming through now working well in animals which can extend their life expectancy by 50% and robustly healthy through it. So I think we're going to see a whole range of things over the next 20 years which will extend people's lives, and it's going to have a massive change on just the distribution of power and the longevity of people, because today you think most people get to their mid-70s and they're probably at that stage starting to retire. But if your life expectancy is now at 120 to 160, those people who actually gain prominence, gain wealth, they're going to keep it for a lot longer. So the transitions of power will be much, much slower. So I think that's one of the things no one's thinking about as we move forward in the future, and that will affect peacefulness. I think for peace, we're in a difficult period at the moment. I expect peace to fall off for the next few years. But from a European perspective, you've got the issues with Russia. But the Russians' economy now is less than the Australian economy. The war is eating up its economic potential, because it just eats more of it up. They're losing about 1,000 people a day on the battlefield. These are serious numbers.
Yeah, and it's a young man who's supposed to carry the country forward.
And they've got very, very low birth rates. So now we look at that and we move forward. Given the size of Europe, the amount of firepower in Europe, Russia's unlikely, other than its nuclear weapons, to pose any real existential threat. Now, it certainly can do a lot of things to destabilise Europe, which it is doing through various means of propaganda and other things as well. But I don't think it's a big threat. If we're then moving beyond that, I think the age of peacefulness within Europe will probably come back. And there'll be issues in the Balkans and maybe out in some of the stand countries as well. But I think the age of peace for Europe will come back. Now, that may not be true for other parts of the world.
So you would rather see a world in 2035 that to some extent is some similarity to the world today?
Well, change always happens at a particular pace. So there'll always be some similarities with the past. So that will be there, but it'll be a different world. And obviously, I've stayed away from mentioning the things everyone's talking around about, like AI. But it will be a very different, very, very different world. One of the key things will be the distribution of wealth. So if we think about it, and we can see the process globally, that wealth is getting into the hands of fewer and fewer people. So we look at the concepts of global megastars in terms of wealth. And we've got people now with wealth which is unimaginable 30 years ago. And so as we create these global markets and we get people dominating those global markets, then the wealth goes in to fewer and fewer hands. And so I think with AI, the changes in jobs, and a lot of the jobs going with AI will be the jobs of the well-educated. So the question then is, and there will be other jobs available, but they won't be anything like the same. So there's going to be a real need to be able to focus on the inequality divides which may spring up as we get these greater concentrations of wealth.
Well, Steve, we did a great tour de force of the world and of the future and the past. The podcasts always end with a special question, which is what your favorite number, Steve? So what's your favorite number, and tell us the story behind the number.
Gee, that's a funny question. 42.
42. Because
there's a series called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Okay, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for any of you, all your older readers or listeners will know it, but for your younger ones, it was a series which looked at and it was a comic series just discovering the universe. And the whole series was about seeking what was the primal number of the universe. And at the very end, they came up and said it was 42. And that was discovered by a group of mice. And those mice actually, for 300 years, have been running experiments on humans to see how they'd react. But I won't go into that. And so the thing I like about the number is there's no simple answer to the universe.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to the great Steve Killelea. You did a lot of big things in your life. So thank you for everything you've been doing to the betterment of the world, Steve.
Oh, great. Well, it's always good talking to Wolfgang. We're good mates. And, thank you for the interview.
Thank you, Steve.